Like there's a lot of work that we'll do in our lives. There's the work we do in our professional lives, our careers. There's the money we'll make, the work that we do to stay healthy. But to me, the work of coming back to your most authentic self, the truth of what and who you are, is the work that matters most. Because when you shift who you are and when you shift how you show up and you learn to become the most infinite, liberated version of you, everything in your life gets better.
Welcome to the Stay Grounded podcast. I'm your host, Raj Jana, founder of Liber8, and it's my mission to help you become the most grounded, loving, and authentic version of yourself that you can be. Each week, I interview experts in the fields of mindset, spirituality, and emotional well-being. My brilliant guests share their tools, stories, and unique perspectives to help you develop the skills you need to show up fully for the people and things that matter most in your life. Now let's dive in.
Alrighty, everybody. Welcome. It's a very special episode of Stay Grounded. I've been wanting to record this episode particularly for quite some time now, because if you've been listening to the show, if you've been following me on social media, if you've been in my life in any capacity, you know that over the last several years, I've been dedicating myself to a new project called Liber8. And I've mentioned it in passings. I've mentioned it in little glimpses here and there. You've maybe seen me post job offerings, and I've had little glimpses, but I realize I actually haven't taken the time to bring you into what Liber8 is, how it came to be, what we're doing, what we're offering, how you can benefit, and so much more. And so in this podcast, I'm going to be giving you the whole story. I'm going to be talking through the entire Liber8 process. I'm going to give you an exact look behind the scenes into what it is and how it shows up and how it can transform your life if you choose to engage with it in whatever capacity you do. And so after this episode, I hope you'll have a really clear understanding of all things Liber8. And if you ever have questions about anything Liber8 related, you can just come back and listen to this podcast and get really clear. And you can always DM me, Instagram me, send me questions. I'm here to answer and support however I can, because this work to me is the work that matters. I'm just going to go back to, 2020, March of 2020, and just really paint the picture of kind of where I was at that point in time. In August of 2019, I had my first kind of like psychedelic experience that really kind of brought me into deeper awareness of myself. Like up until that time, I'd built this really amazing company. I had this podcast, that's this one. But I was in a 9-year relationship that wasn't really fulfilling. And it was just kind of there. And I went into my psychedelic experience with the question of, what's stopping me from going deeper? Why am I not proposing and going into that work? And when I did my journey, it just opened up. It opened up all the good, and it opened up a lot of other stuff, a lot of feelings that I didn't know how to feel, a lot of stuff that I was just like sitting with, and I didn't know how to integrate any of this into my life. And come, next several months, I was going deeper and deeper into like just a lot of challenge. Like I was having a lot of really deep emotional triggers. Like I was in my relationship, like everything she did would just like activate me. And I was getting really on edge. And we were at that point in our relationship where there was just a lot of tension. And I remember in March of 2020, I got an opportunity to interview Panache Desai. Panache, who's still a dear mentor and a dear friend, at the time wrote a book called You Are Enough. And he was on a tour of beginning to talk about this message with the world. And Austin was the first city that he had stopped in. And I lived in Austin at the time. And when he came in to get interviewed, not only do we have the most epic interview that I think I've recorded up until that point, because I know we've had a lot of epic interviews since then, but like up until that point, this was like one of the most epic interviews I'd ever recorded. We sat together, we had a conversation, and then I basically hung out with him the whole time. I hung out with him And all we did was just drop in, and I was sharing all of my challenges with him. And I was sharing how I was getting so triggered by everything my ex was doing. And I was getting so triggered by all these things that just, like, it's like my work was changing and there was all these things outside of me. I was getting so triggered. And I remember, I'll never forget that Panache looks at me. It's like, instead of trying to change what's happening outside of you, what if you just resolved it within you? And I remember when he said that, it didn't really land for me at the time, but because it was such a paradigm shifting conversation. But I'm sharing this here because I think that moment was the moment that started the seed for Liber8 and what Liber8 is and what Liber8 can be. Because what Panache had given me in that moment was this awareness that if you want something to change outside of you, if you want something to change, if you want something externally to shift, the fastest way to actually shift it is to realize that whatever experience you're having, whatever this feeling you're having, this emotional experience you're having, this reaction you're having, this trigger you're having to something outside of you, is actually happening within you. And that concept is it was so radical for me at the time, but it kind of changed everything in my life, because now all of a sudden I wasn't a victim to things outside of me. I was trying to change my ex. I was trying to change everything outside of me, make my business partner change, everyone change, and nothing was happening. But when I realized, okay, them not changing is creating a frustration within me, and this trigger, this emotional trigger, is happening within me. What if I actually took the time to understand what that trigger was doing, what that trigger was teaching me, where it was coming from, how it was, like, what was the root of this experience, and take the time to actually understand what's happening within myself. And what was crazy is, as I started doing that along the way, as I started getting triggered and I started going back and looking for what was happening, and at the time I had all of these tools and resources. I was working with a hypnotherapist, I had a men's coach, I had a psychologist that I was seeing. Like, I had the resources, and it was really messy and clunky. I was looking for these roots, but what I noticed is that every single time I'd find the root and I'd bring it into awareness, and then I would go through whatever level of processes to heal, or not heal, because I don't really like using the word heal, but to integrate, to align, to alchemize, to feel whatever was underneath. Everything in my life started shifting. And that concept is really at the central of Liber8. Like, we everything that we do is about helping you begin the journey of going inward by paying attention to those moments where your nervous system is incredibly activated. In those moments where you do have a fear response, or in those moments where you do have a stress response, or in those moments where you do feel afraid or jealous, or when you have some type of a negative thought loop coming, that to us is the entry point into everything, into yourself. And, and I share this story because, I've been on this awakening path for a really long time. And, I just, it was a very arduous path of, like, going to tools and therapists and communities and trying to flounder my way forward. And there wasn't really a process. I wish if I had Liber8, and I'm going to talk a lot about, like, what the process of Liber8 is on this podcast, but, like, if I had, and listening, like, for everyone listening, like, if I had Liber8 when I first got started, it would have saved me thousands of dollars and wasted money on different therapies that were not actually addressing the root. It would have saved me thousands of hours reading books and looking for answers in places that did not actually have the answers. It would have saved me so much heartache and stress going down the wrong path and having to climb my way out of going into plant medicine journeys and all these places, looking for things that I actually didn't need to be looking for in those places. It would have cleared all the muck, and that's ultimately what the Liber8 process is here to inspire and do. And so, I'm going down this awakening path, and I'm realizing all this stuff about myself. And that's when two simultaneous things happen for me. I'm 2 years into this journey of unraveling myself. I got out of my 9-year relationship. I started realizing all these things about the businesses I was in and the partnerships I was in, and how they were really not in alignment with what I wanted to be doing, how I wanted to be working. And I was in this like really deep process of kind of walking away from a lot of the things that I had built. And on that journey, I had two really peak experiences happen. One was I got a chance to connect with my now co-founder, or one of my co-founders, Mr. Mike Klein, who had realized all the same things that I was realizing as a result of my conversation with Panache. And he had come to that conclusion through his own process and his own journey and his own awareness. And he was working on a platform, a technology solution, a process to help people actually do what I was intuitively doing by going to my hypnotherapist, my coaches, with themselves. And when I saw what he had built, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what like I've been looking for. This is what everybody this is what we need. And so we started working on that together. Simultaneously, I lost a dear friend to stage 4 cancer. Tristan Roney. When I met Tristan, it was 8 months before he passed, and he had tried all the therapies. He had been diagnosed with a form of colon cancer, and he had been diagnosed years before I met him, and he had been on a healing journey. He has a health platform and did all the nutrition and the supplements and all the health practices and everything that he could possibly doing. But he wasn't getting healthier. And so as a Hail Mary last ditch effort, Tristan came into this world of learning to understand himself and learning to love himself and learning to bring in more emotional healing and mental well-being into his life. And, in the last 8 months of his life, I saw him do some of the deeper self-love work that, that sort of happens when you begin to turn the mirror inward. When you begin to look at your triggers and your emotions, and you start to look at it through your own lens of where it's coming from in your life, you start to realize things about yourself. You start to realize things about your childhood. You start to realize about how you were raised. You start to see how all these different influences are contributing to who you are. And a lot of times it's really hard to look at. It's really hard to see. It's really hard to unveil. There's a lot of hurt. And when I saw Tristan bravely open into himself and look at where all of his shame was coming from, where all of his triggers, where all of his fear was coming from, I got to see a side of him that I don't think I've ever seen before. And for the first time in my life, I got to see so clearly how this man's relationship to his body, this man's relationship to his health, this man's willingness to try new therapies, this man's willingness to receive healing in the form of community, in the form was all actually blocked by the beliefs that he had that he was not worthy of love. Where did those beliefs come from? Where did these programs come from? These programs came from childhood, where he had his family who shared those beliefs either unintentionally or unintentionally with him. He came from a culture that our religion that told him his body was not meant to be sacred, and that it's not safe, and it's not okay to touch yourself and to be in your experience. And so I'm looking at this man's experience, and I'm like, wow, for the first time in my life, I'm like, holy crap. Like, his willingness to be healthy, his willingness to fight is directly proportional to this emotional resiliency, this mindset that he has or doesn't have. And, he ended up passing away. And that just sparked a really deep mission for me. It was right around when Mike had shown me his process, what is now the Liber8 Process. He had shown me that. And then this is the same time when Tristan passed. And I'm like, wow, like, okay, this work matters. This work, because, what I got to see from Tristan was he started learning to do this deeper work. And I saw the impact it made on his kids, on his family, on his community. I saw the legacy he left behind of self-love and the message that he left behind. I got to see him heal into dying. And I always had this curiosity of what would have happened if Tristan could have discovered this work when he first got diagnosed, when he first began his health journey. Like, what would have happened? I always had that curiosity. And then 3 months later, Mike and I are starting to test his process, and we're taking it into different communities, and we're testing the Liber8 process. It's about 2.5 years ago. We're seeing incredible results. And then all of a sudden we had a chance to work with a cancer community. Lo and behold, the universe just brought this Dr. Nasha Winters, who's a leading name in integrative oncology. She, has been a big believer in the importance of emotional well-being on creating health outcomes. And she brought it, and she didn't have tools to give her nurse practitioners to work with her patients. And so we started supporting her nurse practitioners. And as we started supporting cancer patients and nurse practitioners and learning how to, and the Liber8 process is really, again, paying attention to your emotional triggers and getting curious around where they're coming from, and safely but slowly uncovering the roots of your emotions and what you're experiencing today, so that we can design personalized healing programs, personalized well-being programs, personalized liberation programs, personalized tools, recommendations, and practices to really help you address what's happening at the root. And so we were walking these nurses and patients through this process. And we had this patient who, she had a form of, I think, breast cancer, and she had triggers around not feeling heard. And she had these, as she was engaging with her doctor just wouldn't hear her or listen to her. And she was getting really emotional about that. And when we started asking her thoughtful questions to track, okay, like, are there other times in your life where you felt similar feelings and a similar emotion around not feeling heard? She started remembering all these different feelings. And eventually she got down to a memory where there was abuse involved. And in that form of abuse, like, she didn't feel very heard by her family. And so we could see how this pattern of not feeling heard was actually going all the way back in time. And as she started speaking about that pattern, her tumor started getting agitated. Like, she started feeling pain where her tumor was. And that's when it was the big, oh my gosh, wow, what is going on here? It was a big aha moment for me and our team. And that was the first time I really saw, wow, like, okay, like, not only is this stuff contributing to her feelings, but what if it's actually contributing to the diagnosis itself, to cancer? What if she actually has an emotional root to this cancer that is a part of healing the cancer? And that was our big hypothesis. And that's what we've really been working towards at Liber8 the last few years, is really, we've been working a lot with cancer patients, working a lot with people with health conditions to track all this stuff and begin to create programs to help people track emotional triggers back in time and then begin to actually heal or feel. I don't like using, I use heal interchangeably with feel, because healing is feeling in our world. In the world of liberate or liberation, when I think about it, it's like, that's what it is. It is identifying the root emotion, identifying the root beliefs, and actually feeling and shifting them so that we can release whatever symptoms are present as a result of that root. This is my origin story. And I share these stories before I actually go into the process, because I want you guys to know that, one, this isn't stuff that we're making up. Our team that's really contributing to this build all have our own origin stories. Mike has his origin story. Emily has her origin story. All of the doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists that are contributing to the build of this all have their origin stories. Our scientists and researchers that are going deep into understanding the nuance that is nervous system health, that is this awakening process, that is this journey of going within. We're all deeply in our own work, and we're deeply touched by the influences in our lives. And each of these influences all contributing to the Liber8 process and what you get to experience by going through any of our programs and what we're building. So in the Liber8 process, the end intention is to liberate you from the unhelpful behaviors, the quote unquote negative emotional experiences, the reactivity that you have as you live your life. Because we believe that when you liberate yourself from these aspects of yourself, you are naturally happier, healthier, more abundant. You naturally have more emotional resiliency. You naturally are just a better functioning human being in society, and your health and everything that you touch, your relationships improve as a result. So that's ultimately what we are trying to do. And with that in mind, this is why in the Liber8 process, we're very interested in paying attention to the triggers, emotional triggers. Now, in order to paint what a trigger is, I also need to paint what the positive is, right? So most personal development is focused on the positive, which is how do I create more love, gratitude, inspiration, joy, connection. And it's really focused on creating more of the good. What we believe is that by actually focusing on the opposite, by paying attention to the fear, the worry, the anxiety, the moments where you actually experience deep a lack of safety, where you experience an anger, when you experience jealousy, when you experience judgment, when you have negative thought patterns, by paying attention there, to me, that is like, and when we pay attention to that work, those feelings, and we do the necessary work, because it takes effort to actually go in. And when I say work has this implication or like implied sense of like being like a lot. What I'm really saying is we're looking at the stuff that you maybe don't want to look at, right? So there's this inherent kind of like resistance to it. And what we find is that when we liberate ourselves and do the work to really understand what's happening here, or when we do the work to understand what's happening here, we can liberate the roots that are creating these feelings. And as a result of that, you naturally have more joy, more compassion, more of the positive. So that's why we pay attention to emotional triggers. And when I say an emotional trigger, it is truly like, we all have them. You get into an argument with your spouse about, for the 15th time, they didn't do the dishes. And you're yelling outwards, but that right there, the response you have to somebody else not doing the dishes is likely because of a giant laundry list. It's really never about the dishes. There's usually a thing beneath a thing beneath a thing, which is likely, hey, this is the 15th time. I don't feel like you're really listening to me. Great. So there's a root to that feeling. And what we've discovered through all of the scientific research we've done through our own processes is that even though it's that fight about the dishes is not about the dishes, if you go one layer deeper than that, you've likely had a similar experience at previous times in your life that did not actually originate with your spouse. And that's ultimately why we pay attention to the triggers, because the triggers are actually bound energy. If you think about it as like this coil that's just bound up in your nervous system, it's literally a reaction that's just responding to some level of how it's responded in the past. Like it's like this person that's coming in is reminding you or reminding your nervous system of something that you experienced in your past, likely in your childhood, that is similar, and your reaction to this response or to this person was what kept you safe as a child, was what got you attention as a child, is what got you love as a child, is what kept you, what brought, and so that exploration, that awareness is why we begin with triggers, because the triggers are the points when your amygdala is on fire, and your amygdala is your crocodile brain. So if you have a prefrontal cortex, which is your logical brain, and then your amygdala is when your fight or flight is just on fire. By paying attention to those moments where you're on fire, we have an entry point into what is actually going on in your body, what is actually going on in your nervous system, which then allows us to actually design and understand the roots there. And from there, we can now go do deeper. So the Liber8 process begins with that. So we have an app, the Liber8 app. Once you join our program, you can go to our website and I'll give you a link to do that. That's liber8.health. You go to the program, you purchase the program, and then from there you get a link to download our app. And then over the next 10 days, we're basically teaching you how to pay attention to these emotional triggers. We're taking you on a journey of just tracking basic mindfulness. Okay, who's triggering me? What is triggering me? And you log it. And inside the app, we are asking 10 to 12 different questions to help us understand what's actually going on. We have a feelings wheel in there. If you don't know what the feelings wheel is, it's this sort of beautiful resource with almost 200 different emotions. So if you don't know how to name your emotions, we have all that in there. We're starting to collect what's going on in your body. We're starting to collect, what's the story? What do you think is actually happening in your own words? Can you explain it to us? And we're asking you to explain things in those moments where you're triggered. From there, the next step of the process is to go into what we call a mapping session. Now, the trigger logging process by itself is super valuable because now you're paying attention to those moments where you're actually feeling triggered. And if you just do that alone, our clients and the individuals that we worked with over the years have a ton of, they get a lot of value out of it. I still get a lot of value out of that because what you can do is you can basically go to your therapist, your coach, your friend, and just talk about the actual trigger. And oftentimes what happens is when you reread what you wrote down in the moments you're triggered from a state of not being triggered, you're like, holy crap. I was saying things in a way that was almost vile, almost angry. Where's that coming from? It's not coming from here. It's not coming from right now. It's coming from your roots. So the next step is where we guide you into a 90-minute process with one of our certified space holders and team members that have gone through rigorous training over years and vetted through our own protocols to basically guide you in a safe, slow, and methodical way to track your present day trigger, whatever that is, back in time so that we can capture the emotional history of that trigger. Now, when we capture the emotional history of a trigger, why do we do that? Again, coming back to this argument about the dishes didn't really start about the dishes. And in our model, we follow the work of Stan Grof. Stan Grof is the originator of the holotropic breathwork method. And he came up with this concept called the COEX system, which is the condensed emotional experience system. And his belief, just like Bessel van der Kolk, Body Keeps the Score, and many different bodies of work that have come before us, is that unprocessed emotion lives in the body until it has a safe space to release. And so this trigger you're having today, there are previous times in your life where that same trigger has expressed itself. And our system, our mapping process, is about tracking all those moments where you actually had a similar trigger, tracking it all the way back to the root, the first time you remember having that trigger, so that we can now be in full awareness of, okay, if we are to design a plan, or if we're going to send you into a therapy session, or if we're going to do anything, and you only have one shot, let's get all the data we need so that we can really, truly address the root. And so that's what the mapping process does. The mapping process is this really amazing experience. And to be honest, people in our community, this is the thing that changes lives. This mapping process, it just brings so much awareness to your patterns and where things come from. And, we've gotten incredible testimonials around this process itself, just on how healing or revealing it is, just to be seen and held in that safe container by somebody who really knows what they're doing. And so then after that process, we then take that and put it into our technology. And the Liber8 technology, what it does is it now takes all of this data that we've collected about your triggers in your past, and it overlays it with all these different data sets to basically find trends and patterns on what types of tools have worked for other people who have similar emotions, similar challenges, similar upbringings to you. And that to me is the bread and butter. That to me is the gift, right? Because you're getting a data-driven recommendation. So we take all of this and generate an emotional lab report. That's what our technology does. Inside the emotional lab report, we show you basically like an education of the entire process. We show you where your patterns come from, why they happen the way they are. We start to teach you about, just nervous system health and the basics of it. And then you get a personalized 6-week program. In that personalized 6-week program, we're giving you daily practices, personalized book recommendations, personalized podcast recommendations, personalized journal prompts, and a lot of work that you can do on your own to begin actually addressing the root and resolving the root so that you can be free from the root. And, that lab report, this program is not the only thing we provide. You also get access to the Liber8 Community, which is a community with others who are just like you, who are working on their own emotional lab reports, their own 6-week programs, and beginning to ask questions and do the deeper work and attend community live events and get access to healing modalities. And it's just a place where we're all supporting one another. This program at this point in time is $137. We've done a lot of work because of the technology, because of the way we've built our system, because of our unique sort of secret sauce. We can keep the cost low because of how much efficiency we've baked in. And that's where our heart is. We want you to really feel supported as you're going into this. And yeah, so that's the Liber8 process. And then, we track your outcomes. Are you actually getting better? Are you actually learning this stuff? Because ultimately, our process hinges around this idea that if you're still getting triggered by the same stuff after going to therapy session after therapy session, plant medicine journey after plant medicine journey, coaching practice after coaching, if you're still getting triggered by the same stuff, you're not actually addressing the root. And that was the problem I was facing when I first got down on my journey. When I was going down my journey, I was just completely I was throwing so much money and time at the problem, but I wasn't going into the root. And when I discovered this process, when I started going deeper into this work, is when everything shifted for me. And I really believe in this. I really do. This is I've seen the transformation I've experienced. I've accomplished 30 years worth of therapy in 4 years as a result of looking at the problem through this frame, by focusing on the triggers, by mapping the triggers, by addressing the root with different tools, by being supported in community, by allowing myself to be seen by others, and really let go of shame and anger, and learning how to process these emotions, learning how to set better boundaries, learning how to communicate my needs, learning how to choose the tools that are best for me, learning how to what to track, what to measure, being taught this stuff. I wish I had this when I first got started. And that's why we're creating this in the way that we are, because we're creating this for individuals, whether you're just beginning on your path or you're somebody who's long on the path of awakening. This process has something to teach you. This process, and if engaged in, this process will teach you how to work with your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, so that you can be your own greatest self-healer. You can be your own greatest tool for liberation. Because to me, that is ultimately why we don't, I don't really like healing as its own word, and we use it because it's what fits the narrative right now. But to us, liberation, that to me is more of what we're helping people do. Our liberate, even Liber8, really, if you expand that out, it's liberating your infinite self. And we believe that you're not broken. We don't believe you actually need to be fixed. We believe that you have programs and unprocessed emotions and it's almost like you're not calibrated to your authentic self, the part of you that is like really truly calm and compassionate and loving and confident and courageous and creative. Like that's really what you are. Like we really believe like that's your authenticity, but you have all sorts of trauma and different layers of beliefs, whether you accumulated it from your lifetime or from, epigenetically it traveled through, like by, the biology of belief by Bruce Lipton. Like there's a lot of science that actually supports that emotion and trauma that didn't get felt and processed by your ancestors travels down through genetics, through the genes, until, so you may even be having emotional triggers that are not of this lifetime. Like you just have imprints in your nervous system that are so old. But what's beautiful is that you can liberate yourself from those by going through a process like we've developed, a process like we have, a program like we have. And so, to me, liberation is really what we're here to inspire and empower, because that is the truth of who you are. Like we don't believe we don't believe you're your triggers. We don't believe you're your traumas. We don't believe you are any of the negative stories or thoughts that you're experiencing about yourself from what people tell you. You are something so much bigger. And that's why community is so important. That's why we have the Liber8 community, because when you're transforming, going from caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly, it's a messy process. And to have people to hold you, to cheer you on, to remind you of this is so important. And that's ultimately why we've built what we've built, why this exists, what we believe in, why I'm so passionate about this, because ultimately, like, this to me is the root. Like, what if, like, I go back to Tristan and I really think about Tristan. Like, if Tristan had this, like, what if Tristan's cancer was actually emotional? What if he had an emotional root to the disease and he tried going to all these treatment plans and nothing worked, but he found the tool that he needed, the support that he needed at the end of his life, which still changed the way that he died? What if people had this sooner? What if patients had this sooner? What if you had this sooner in your life, when your relationship was just starting to get rocky, instead of when it's on fringes and about to break, like mine? What if? And that's ultimately why I'm so passionate about this, because I believe that when you begin to do this work sooner rather than later, before you're forced into a health crisis or a relationship crisis or a work crisis or an initiation from life, if you choose to lean in so that you can be happier, healthier, more productive, more connected, more loving, just for yourself, if you can lean in now and be supported on this journey of awakening, you can have the rest of your life to live. I'm so grateful that I discovered this work in my 20s, because now I feel like I've got the rest of my life ahead of me. And so that's why it doesn't matter where you are in your life. By doing this work, you can create the next version of your life. You can have a whole new way of looking at this. And you don't have to wait. You don't have to be in what you are forever. That's ultimately why we exist, what we're here to do. We have several ways that you can work with us. Right now, our flagship program is a $137 program where we walk you through the Liber8 process and we create a personalized plan and a personalized emotional lab report that you can act on inside of a community. We're getting ready to launch our 3-month emotional resiliency programs, which we worked on with cancer patients for years now. We're getting ready to launch those. Those will, but everything that we do is about, again, creating programs that are tailored to you and supporting you on your journey to liberation. And so I hope this podcast really gives you an idea of what Liber8 is and how it can support you and how you can walk away. We have people in our communities that are truly actually not getting triggered anymore. People in our communities that know how to set strong boundaries, that have a support system, that are cheering them on, that feel seen. And more importantly, they see themselves. They feel the internal feeling of love. They feel how amazing they are, and that now is pouring into the world. And coming back to really speaking at what I spoke in the beginning, when you shift within, everything shifts outside of you. When you learn to hold a bigger frame of love for yourself, the world reciprocates that. And that is the gift that we continue seeing in our communities. It's what we see in our cancer patients that finally wake up to the fullness of themselves, and we see the improvements in health. We see the improvements in their relationships. We see this is why we do what we do. And when I speak to like the work, like there's a lot of work that we'll do in our lives. There's the work we do in our professional lives, our careers. There's the money we'll make, right? There's the work that we do to stay healthy, right? And there's that. There's the work that we'll do to, improve our relationships and make friends and improve our networks. But to me, the work of coming back to your most authentic self, your most authentic nature, the truth of what and who you are, is the work that matters most. Because when you shift who you are, and when you shift how you show up, and when you learn to love yourself and integrate all the parts of you that are hurt, that are scared, that are vulnerable, and you learn to become the most infinite, liberated version of you, the true you, everything in your life gets better. Your relationships improve. The work you do in the world is more connected. You end up actually being the beacon of light that you are. And this is why we're pouring everything we are into supporting you in this journey. And so if anything that I've said on this podcast has resonated for you and you want to go deeper, head to liber8.health, that is Liber8.health, and learn more. You can hit the Get Started button. You can read about the science that goes into this entire program. You can hear about testimonials from other people who've gone down this path. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me, the team, and we're here to support. We love you. We're cheering you on. We know that you have been working so hard. And we know the bravery it takes to go within. We know that, and we honor you, and we want to celebrate you and cheer you on as you make the brave choice to go within. Thank you for giving me the gift of your attention. Thank you for giving me the privilege of recording this podcast and sharing it with all of you, because it truly is a gift to support you in this way. So I hope you love this episode of Stay Grounded. I'm your host, Raj, and until next time.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Stay Grounded. No matter where you're from or what you're going through, I hope it helps you remember just how incredible you are and have always been. If you're on a path of emotional healing or self-discovery and would like to learn how Liber8 can support your journey, head to www.rajjana.com/Liber8, that is Liber8, to learn more about our current group programs and one-on-one offerings. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.